and I'll be talking about as a linker between the chemoresistance and cancer stem cells and in epithelial ovarian carcinoma. So the ovarian carcinoma is commonly known as a silent killer because it doesn't have any symptoms. So it is asymptomatic in nature, and the patient when coming to clinics are already stage 3 and stage 4. So this is the fourth leading cause of gynecological deaths around the world. As per India is concerned, it is the third most lethal cancer amongst women. And basically it is of three different types: germ cell, epithelial, cells called stromal cells. Out of which epithelial is the most predominant one. And if you subdivide this epithelial, it could be mixed, mucinous, serous, endometrioid, and clear cell. So these are based on the histopathology of it, so they can be categorized. And serous is again the most predominant one in ovarian carcinoma. So it causes around 85 to 90% of the disease stages. And as far as chemotherapy is concerned, it is mainly platinum and taxane like cisplatin, carboplatin, and paclitaxel, either alone or in combination. So even if there is a chemotherapy regimen, there is surgery and everything, the patient shows first-line therapy, but still 50 to 60% ultimately exhibit recurrence and relapse the disease. So the major issue is what? It's the recurrence and the relapse. So when we talk about the mode of action of the cisplatin and paclitaxel, they are entirely different. Cisplatin forms a DNA adapt, and the paclitaxel inhibits the cell division by binding with the microtubules. Apart from these two, the mode of action is different, but the generation of chemoresistance is a common phenomenon that might arise because of the multi-resistant factorials. So that could be because of enhanced DNA repair, increased cell survival mechanism, suppression in apoptosis, altered drug metabolism, and all. So what we wanted to look, are there a subset of cells within the heterogeneous tumor designated as cancer stem cells? And these CSCs are already reported to have a high DNA repair efficiency and the chemoresistance property. When we talk about chemoresistance, there are two schools of thoughts which say that the resistance comes from two different ways. One is the acquisition of mutations, during which the cells were not resistant, but under the selection therapy, it got certain mutations in membrane transporters, DNA repair genes, and other apoptotic signals. However, on the second half, there is a innate resistant cells known as cancer stem cells. Over a course of therapy, it might get selected and enriched. And that's the reason, even if there is a first-line chemotherapy doing its role, but later on stages come back because the cancer stem cells somehow elope that drug selection pressure. So when we talk about ovarian cancer stem cells, they are highly tumorigenic and chemoresistant in nature. And there's another report which suggests that these insulin growth factor receptors have a crosstalk in chemoresistance, and they have proven that these inhibitors can overcome the cytotoxic resistance. But it was not well studied by the time. In India, for the treatment of stage 3 and stage 4 patient, it is followed by a neoadjuvant therapy because the patient comes in the clinic, they have a lot of ascitic fluid in their abdomen. So they used to first debulk the tumor with neoadjuvant therapy followed by surgery and again adjuvant chemotherapy. But still, they come with the chemoresistance and the relapse. So we wanted to look into how we can detect the chemoresistance early by targeting the right population, whether it is a cancer stem cells or it's a IGF-1R axis, or it could be both, that we don't know. So since I mentioned earlier that these patients come at late stage, we wanted to categorize how early we can detect. So we don't have a patient where I can look upon that what could be the early resistant markers. So what we did, we developed an in vitro resistant model in our lab using cisplatin, paclitaxel, and combination. So the cell line we used that was sensitive to these drugs, and with the course of 8 months, we developed these cell lines and we categorized them into early and the late resistant stages, depending on their percent survival at IC50. Per se, early resistant cells showed 60 to 65% viability at IC50 concentration, and the late resistant cells showed more than 99% of viability. That means they are at the late stage, and these cells categorized at early stage. And in all my further talk, I will be designating this early as ER and late resistant cells as LR. So now to understand the role of biological and molecular players during induction of drug resistance, the whole story will move around the cancer stem cells for its characterization, and these three different cell lines we use in the whole study. So site population assay is a major assay to isolate these cancer stem cells based on its high efflux drug mechanism. When we looked in our model, cisplatin paclitaxel combination, we found that compared with the sensitive cells, there was a significant increase in the percentage of SP fraction, that is 1.4 to 4.8 and then 6.7. And even this enrichment was much higher in the combination treatment where it was 18.1%. That suggests that with increasing resistance, there is actual enrichment of these cancer stem cells phenotype. And then we wanted to look into if they are real cancer stem cells, they have the property to differentiate. So what we did, we isolated this site population fraction. We did multiple sortings with it to see whether at first sort they are 100% SP fraction, at second sort what is happening to them. So even if they are getting enriched to 27%, there is a population which is a non-site population coming up again. That means these cancer stem cells can differentiate into a non-cancer stem cell population as well. However, on the other side, when we look at non-site population, at 2-3 passages, the non-site population was not able to revert back to the site population. And since we are talking about cancer stem cells, they have a much higher self-renewal ability. We did one functional assay to prove that they are very highly self-renewing property, that is a spheroid formation assay. And when we compared these cancer stem cells versus the non-cancer stem cell population sorted out, we found that across the resistant model, irrespective of the drug given, there was a significant increase in the number of spheroids formed from the cancer stem cells as compared with the counterpart, which is non-cancer stem cells. And these are the morphologies of the spheroids formed at the multiple passages. And when we compare the unsorted population, that is the main population, since they have an enriched CSC population in their fraction, there was a significant increase in the spheroid forming ability from sensitive to resistant. And we also compared the chemoresistance, because this self-renewal property will tell about the stemness property, more of the cancer stem cell phenotype. But we were also interested to look into what is happening to its chemoresistance nature. We did one MPT assay and found that this SP fraction was significantly high percent viable as compared with the non-site population. That means along with a high self-renewal property, high stemness property, they have high chemoresistance property as well. Since they have an increased self-renewal property, we look into the pluripotent co-transcription factors like OCT4, SOX2 and NOR. And here also we found the same thing, like with increasing resistance, there was increased expression of these OCT4 and SOX2. However, NANO was not very significant in the cisplatin model. In paclitaxel model, it does show a significant increase. So at least we know that with increasing resistance, either it is early or the late, we have increased self-renewal property, increased transcription factors like OCT4, SOX2 and NANO. Now what next? What we did is, we took a knockdown strategy for OCT4 gene, and this was adapted from Zeres et al. And we first transiently validated this shRNA sequence, and then we prepared a stable knockdown in all the cell lines we used, like early resistant and late resistant of all the models, and we validated that the knockdown effect is there, both at real time and the Western. And then we monitored the spheroid formation again, and what we found that OCT4 knockdown cells were highly compromised for their self-renewal property. That means the OCT4 is the gene which is providing self-renewal property and the cancer stem cell phenotype to these resistant cells as well as the sensitive cells. And when we looked at the spheroid formation of the knockdown cells, even if they form spheroids, but the morphology is very altered. And if you look at the late resistant spheroids, they are having very good margin and along with the very homogeneous spheroids. And the other step, what we did, we also monitored the SP fraction, which was the core assay we performed for isolation of CSCs. And after knockdown of OCT4, the SP fraction was also compromised. The control population showed 3.9% of SP fraction, however, the knockdown went down to 1.3%. In late resistant cells, 6.6 to it goes to 2.7%. That means knocking down OCT4 has an effect in its both chemoresistance property and its stem cell phenotype. But there was a marginal decrease in the drug resistance phenotype, which was shown by the MTT assay over here. And the Western blot shows that OCT4 knockdowns have an effect on phospho-activity level as well. The phospho-activity level goes down with knockdown of OCT4. And then we move to in vivo T1 validation, because tumor xenograft is one of the gold standard for the validation of these cancer stem cells. When we implant them in very low number like 10,000 or 5,000 cells, they initiate the tumor formation, but these non-cancer stem cells does not. So in this, we wanted to not only look into the tumor xenograft forming ability, rather we wanted to look into the tumor growth kinetics in vivo, where we cannot see the tumor from outside. We implanted 10,000 cells in a cohort of mice, and SP and non-SP. So SP was almost 10,000 cells and non-SP was 20,000 cells. And it showed that from day 0 to day 40 there was a significant increase in the bioluminescence signal here. So you do see from day 0 to day 40 there is an increased tumorigenic property of this SP fraction. However, the non-SP fraction, which was having a higher signal than SP fraction, it goes down. That means these non-SP fractions are not having any tumor initiating property in it. But at the same time, the cancer stem cells, which is designated as SP cells, it can form the tumor within 25 to 40 days. So these experiments were done from paclitaxel early resistant cells. Now we moved ahead to paclitaxel late resistant cells. Surprisingly, what we found that compared to the early resistant, the late resistant cells started the tumor initiation after day 80. But here also non-SP did not form any tumor as we expected. But the interesting thing was the early resistant cells are forming tumor much earlier, and the late resistant cells have a delay in tumor formation. So why is it so? So we performed the same experiment in another resistant model, that is cisplatin, and we found that in cisplatin model also the tumor initiation started after day 80 and day 90, and by day 110 it formed a tumor, same from 10,000 cells. So the interesting thing was why it is happening. Like these are the parental cells are same, the resistance pattern is only different. So early resistant versus the late resistant cells. Then we came across IGF-1 signaling. So ovarian surface has a high IGF-1 signaling because of hormonal changes and the pre-ovulatory follicle that has very high proliferation rate. And this IGF-1 is mainly responsible for proliferation, differentiation in the granulosa cells. We tried to connect the link between IGF-1 and the high tumor efficiency of these early resistant cells and the late resistant cells. So we asked the question, is IGF-1 crucial for initiation and maintenance of resistance along with the stemness phenotype in ovarian carcinoma? What we found, it was very interesting to us. Across the resistant model, unlike earlier data where we found that there is a gradual increase in the resistance property, gradual increase in the stemness phenotype, but here what we found that the IGF-1R was very active at the early stage, but it was going down at the late stage, irrespective of the cisplatin, paclitaxel and the combination model. And the whole data was validated further with the Western blot. And then since we use a single cell line over here, we prepared another cell line with the same resistant model, that is ODM42. And there also we found that at early stage IGF-1 was increasing, at the late stage was not. So the question was, is IGF-1R is somehow helping the cells to become resistant at the initial phase, and later on that role is being taken over by some other signaling. So we took two cell lines which were innately resistant to cisplatin, that was SQV3 and A. So there also when we compare with the two sensitive versus two innately resistant, we see that there is an increased IGF-1R signaling. And since I am talking about IGF-1R, which is a receptor tyrosine kinase, it has to be functionally on the membrane. We did confocal analysis to see whether these early resistant cells are there on the membrane. Yes, we do see that early resistant cells are on the membrane. And then we come up with a inhibition strategy of IGF-1R. When we looked for IGF-1R inhibition, there were more than 2-3 inhibitors reported. We wanted to inhibit IGF-1R specifically because IGF-1R has huge homology with insulin receptors. And if we target the common insulin receptors and IGF-1R, that leads to a metabolic liability like insulin resistance. We chose picroportofilin, which is a specific inhibitor for IGF-1R that inhibits the kinase activity. And taking in consideration, if active IGF-1R axis is helping out the cell for higher survival and early resistance, do we see any reversal in chemoresistance and the stem cell phenotype? So for this, we used picroportofilin in a dose-dependent manner. We do see that early resistant cells like paclitaxel, early resistant cells, you see late resistant cells do not respond to this paclitaxel. But when we use the early resistant cells along with the PPP, that responded very well. So all the late resistant cells were not responding to this inhibitor, rather the early resistant cells where IGF-1R is high, they were responding in a better way. And we also looked at the phospho-AKT levels, which is downstream to IGF-1R. The early resistant cells, they are having dose-dependent decrease in phospho-AKT levels as compared with the late resistant cells. and this is STOV3 and A, which are innately resistant, and we do find the similar results there. And then we went ahead with a combination treatment wherein we wanted to have a higher efficacy and lesser toxicity. For that, we calculated the IC10 and IC20 value of the both drugs and the inhibitors. And when we combined both the inhibitors along with the cytotoxic drugs, we found that like these two are the early resistant cells and these two suppose late resistant cells. And in combination, these two, the cell killing was maximum because they have a high IGF-1R. Even if we use IC20 concentration, the IC20 concentration alone is not a very toxic effect. But along with the combination, it shows a very significant effect in terms of killing, that to 72% and more than 45% of cell kill as combination. And then we also looked at the long-term survival of a cell through clonogenic assay, wherein again when we compare the early resistant cells with late resistant cells, there is a significant decrease in the colony formation as compared with the counterpart of the late resistant cells. And here also we do see the same result irrespective of the chemoresistant model being developed, like cisplatin, paclitaxel, and even combination. And these data were published last year. And then we moved on. Since we work in a hospital, we tried doing this in patient sample in a follow-up manner. So when patient comes to the clinic, we took the ascitic fluid, we did the mRNA isolation and calculated the IGF-1R gene levels. And when the same patient undergoes chemotherapy, the tumor has reduced, and after surgery, we again collected the tumor samples in a paired way. And what we found very significantly that post-chemotherapy, the same patient have a significantly increased IGF-1R activity. Apart from only one patient, we do see there is a decrease. Otherwise, we did a lot of patient studies and we found that there was a significant increase in IGF-1R levels post-chemotherapy. That means somehow this IGF-1R signaling is helping all those cells to become more chemoresistant in nature. And then we also did the keratin staining to show that all these are the epithelial cells, and we are not going biased with the ascitic cells versus the tumor cells. And now we want to understand what is the correlation between IGF-1R and stemness phenotype, because there, as such, in ovarian carcinoma, there is no report which is suggesting that IGF-1R have any role in stemness phenotype as well. So we use this inhibitor and then we monitored the spheroids, which will be reflecting its stemness phenotype. And as earlier, we found that using this IGF-1R inhibitor, actually we are depleting the cancer stem cell phenotype, and thus we are getting a low number of spheroids. And also we monitored the levels of OCT4, SOX2 and NO, that thus decreases post-treatment. But these are the early resistant cells. Mind you, these only have a 60 to 65% viability under IC50. But what is happening to the late resistant cells? They are 90 to 95% viable. So how do they maintain the large amount of chemoresistance and stemness phenotype irrespective of the IGF-1R, because their IGF-1R is very low. But at late stage, we have seen that the phospho-AKT levels are significantly high as compared with the sensitive and the early stage. And we came across the AKT inhibitor and we did the inhibition studies for the late resistant cells, and we found that there was a dose-dependent decrease in the phospho-AKT levels. And surprisingly, when we inhibited this AKT, we found that the IGF-1R was coming back again. And then we saw that when we inhibit phospho-AKT, the levels of OCT4 were not changing much. That means OCT4 is coming downstream to it. However, when we inhibit OCT4, the phospho-AKT is going down. And then we again applied the same strategy wherein we did the combination of IC10 and IC20 of each drug and the inhibitor, and found that all the late resistant cells were responding very well with the combination of AKT inhibitor and the cytotoxic drugs, cisplatin, paclitaxel, and even combination. But if you see, when we inhibit phospho-AKT, the IGF-1R is coming back. And in earlier slides, we have shown that the early resistant cells have high IGF-1R activity. That means when we are inhibiting phospho-AKT, actually we are moving these chemo-resistant cells backwards towards the early stage. That means from 90% viable to 60 to 65% viability. That means they are becoming more chemosensitive to the drugs. So to summarize all the results till what we have, we come up with two different strategies that will provide a therapeutic window for a patient during the course of chemotherapy, whether to go ahead with a neoadjuvant therapy or not. So the early stage where IGF-1R is active, downstream to IRS1, AKT and some other molecules like MEK pathway, somehow it is maintaining the higher stemness and chemoresistance property. and the level of OCT4 which is high at the early stage is remaining unaltered at the late stage. So how the late stage high level of phospho-AKT and high level of OCT4 is being maintained? So when late stage have high phospho-AKT, when we inhibit AKT, there is a decrease in stimulus and chemoresistance phenotype. But the same high level of phospho-AKT is via suppression of feedback loop, it is inhibiting IGF-1R. So high level of phospho-AKT can inhibit IGF-1R. Thus, across the model, when we see there is an increased expression of IGF-1R at the early stage, and the late stage, increased phospho-AKT suppressing the IGF-1R activity. And there is a recent report published by Lin et al. In Cell Stem Cell showing that this phosphorylated OCT4 can bind on the AKT promoter and regulate the AKT expression. So what we believe that at early stage, IGF-1R is initiating the drug resistance mechanism. They are initiating the stimulus phenotype, and later on it is passed away towards the other signaling molecule, that is phospho-AKT. And during that process, the AKT is now suppressing the IGF-1R that no, I am sufficient to do these activities. So they are taking over the role and maintaining high chemoresistance and stimulus phenotype. And that high level of phospho-AKT might be regulated by high level of phospho-OCT4, which can increase the AKT1 mRNA. So I would like to acknowledge my mentor, Dr. Pritha Ray, for supporting on this work, and ACTREC and UGC for funding, and University Grant Commission for the fellowship. And this is our campus in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Ren, for the very impressive talk. Any question or suggestion for Ren from the audience?
Have you tried to, because you have they are the cancer stem cells, have you tried to, and they express the pluripotent markers, have you tried to differentiate them into the different type of the cells? Can they differentiate?
No, ma'am, that we have not done the functionality, but with cytopopulation assay, at least we have shown that these cancer stem cells, when we subculture them, they differentiate into the non-cytopopulation phenotype. That itself suggests that they can differentiate into different populations. But the adipogenic and the osteogenic property differentiation we have not looked into. Yeah, we have not looked into that. Because see, we are majorly focusing on how we can detect this chemoresistance and how we can tackle the problem. So we majorly focused on the signaling cascade, which is making them more resistant and acquiring more of the stimulus phenotype.
Yeah,
So
but that's happening in the clinical, actually in vivo state. In the patients, what happens when there is a tumor gains the heterogeneity.
Yeah.
And in the heterogeneous population, so there is only the stem cell which
is getting enriched.
Which could be enriched, but could be with the treatments.
They acquire mutations as well.
Yeah, they acquire mutations, or they can revert back to the if they are the pluripotent, they sometimes revert back to the normal type of the cells. So have you seen any at the molecular level, the molecular profiling of this one, like the genetic level, any NGS sequencing or any?
No, ma'am. Actually, we did all the functional assays here. We didn't look at the genetic level. What is happening?
That's very interesting, actually.
Yeah.
Very good talk.
Thank you.
Okay, I have one question. So when you examine the level of IGF-1R in the ovarian cancer specimen, you notice only some of them show the high expression of IGF-1R.
So
No, I understand. I just wonder whether you have co-expressed all four. I mean, whether the expression of both IGF-1R and all4 was the key to mediate high-grade ovarian cancer instead of only IGF-1R.
yeah, that's what we observed. We came across this was a paper published last year, and then we recruited more patients than in that study, and we found that out of 17 patients, only 2 patients there was a decreased IGF-1R, and all the rest of the patients were having increased IGF-1R, and the 2 patients which were having low, they were highly chemoresistant in nature, and they didn't respond to the chemotherapy at the first go. So they were the more of recurrent patients. So they did not respond to the first line of chemotherapy as well.
Now, did you check the OCT4 expression?
OCT4, no, we couldn't check the OCT4.
Supposedly you're seeing an OCT4
Yeah,
as a key mediator.
definitely we couldn't do that.
Yeah.